I wanted to do a bag project, like a zipper pouch project, and at first here we need to do a template. So I like using 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, just like printer paper, and you could also do this with an A4, but you want to take like a 6-inch mark, and then you see I'm doing another small mark 2 inches from the top here. So like I said, you could use A4, but you wouldn't have to do the centimeter equivalent here. But we're going to cut along that 6-inch line so that our pattern here is just like 6 inches long. And it's going to be that 8.5 inches wide. And then at that 2-inch mark, what we're going to do, we're just folding this in half widthwise. And then we're just going to use like a dinner plate and draw a curve between that 2-inch mark and that center fold. So just something that's like pleasing to your eye. So this is like a 9-inch dinner plate, but whatever curve you can do that is pleasing to your eye will work well. And then we're going to use a 9-inch closed bottom zipper, or if you have a, an equivalent zipper, that's totally fine. So I'm just cutting this curved area out. And when you open it up, just make sure that that's a pleasing, shape for you. Otherwise, you could just do it again. So then, going to take 1 inch off the corner here while it's folded. And this is going to be like our box bottom of this pouch. So this would be a great template to keep and just like reuse it. And because at this point, the template's done. So here I'm just laying out this template onto 2 layers of fabric, and this would be the outside fabric. So just cutting those both at once. And then here I'm laying those on batting and cutting that out in like a rectangle, and then also the inside fabric. And then I'm going to add 2 pieces of washi tape, and you can use whatever. You can even draw a line with chalk or anything. But I'm just putting 2 pieces of washi tape on that straight, like where that 4-inch line is. And then I'm using that just for my first quilting line, just for convenience sake. So you could start quilting anywhere, it doesn't matter. And then I'm just going to quilt on both sides of this line. And then I'm just going to eyeball like how far away that tape is from where I've sewed. And then I'm just going to move that tape down. Well, I'll move it up, and then I'll move it down the other way as well. So quilting through this template is pretty quick. It only takes 2 minutes. And then we'll do that with both pieces. So once it's done with the quilting, we're going to just trim around that front piece. What you want is a 1 3/4 inch wide strip by about 13 or 14 inches. We just want it hanging over like 2 or 3 inches on both sides. We start that on the inside fabric, and then we'll finish it on the outside fabric. So I'm just taking this few stitches at a time and going curved around. We're just doing that top curved portion, and that's it. We're not doing any of the rest of the bag. But I love the look of this binding strip against the zipper. I just feel like it looks so pretty. So I do this on a lot of these zipper pouches. And it's a great spot to do like a contrasting print. So now we just kind of curl that around. And now we're at the front of the bag. And so we do the same thing. We just pin it from the center. And then we just start curving it around. And then when we sew this, we're going to leave these tails on for the moment. And then I'm just going to take a few stitches, and then we're just going to work our way around. So this is a nice gentle curve. It's not at all difficult to sew curves, because sometimes that can be, you know, it can be a little bit difficult, but this one is such a gentle curve that it works really well with this. And then we're going to add the zipper, and both of those go pretty easily. So if you're a beginner, I wouldn't worry about doing this curve at all. I would definitely jump in and do it. And then when I was at this point, I did hit it with the iron, just kind of straighten it out a little bit. So now we're going to add this onto the zipper. So I did pin it in the middle. I basically just folded my zipper in half and found the middle. And then I folded this pink piece in the middle and found, folded that and found the middle. And then I just pinned that. And then I moved to pin the zipper all the way to that edge. So the end, that binding strip on the end of the zipper, we want to actually sew over top of that zipper. So I'll show you on the end here what I mean. Okay, so I'm going to do the super slow-mo here and just show you what I mean here. So we lay that binding strip over the end of the zipper. Don't go on the, like, past the half of it. But we're going to do that on each end of the zipper. So 4 different times we're going to put that binding strip over the top of that zipper, right where the tab is. But that way when you sew the sides of the bag, you're seeing the binding strip. You're not seeing kind of like the not so pretty end of the zipper. So see how this side of the zipper looks really good. It really works out well. And then we're just going to go and do the other side now. We're just going to do the exact same thing. We're going to find the center. I still have that pin in the center of the zipper. I'll just find the center of that pink piece. And now I'm just making sure these sides match as well. Kind of just making sure that everything is matching up. But I'll just pin that. And like I said, starting from the center out. And again, just leaving those tails long because we're going to keep them long until we do these sides and we can match everything up. So here I am sewing the sides together, and I'm sewing from the non-zipper side up to the zipper. And I'm doing that because once you get up to that zipper, there's a lot of bulk there. So I just, when I get to that point, I start sewing with the hand crank instead of sewing it. And that way, if I'm hitting, like my zipper is plastic, but if yours is metal, you would want to hand crank it. You don't want to have your needle kind of like hit the zipper. So if you're hand cranking it, you have obviously a lot more control over what part of it you're sewing. So now I'm just sewing the bottom, and what we want to do, you know, remember those 1-inch areas that we notched out? So you want to sew a 1/4 inch up to that and then back tack. And that will let us easier do our box corners. So we do that for the sides and for the bottom. Now that I've sewn the side, I'm just trimming off that long tail. So now we're going to do some binding edges on those seams that we just sewed. So the first time we did binding strips, we did like we sewed one side, then we wrapped it around, and that looks really nice and neat. These interior ones, we're just going to pre-fold that 1/4 inch seam in, and we're just going to put it on all at once. So for these strips, you want to do fabric from the inside fabric that is 2 inches, and that way it's larger, and then when we sew our seams, we're going to catch both sides of that strip and the seam at the same time. So this is a little less accurate and a little less pretty. That's why it's okay to do it on the inside of the bag. But then the ends if the end isn't going to be covered, like here by the zipper, we want to fold that in so it gives us a nice clean edge. But at the bottom, since that's going to be covered up by another one of these, then you can just leave that raw. So I'm ending that strip about 1/4 inch from the edge. So that way when we do our box seam, which is that little inch cutout, then we can have a nice clear area in order to do our last binding strips there. So I don't start this strip at the top like over the zipper, I'm just starting below the zipper so it doesn't catch it. So all told, you'll probably need like 2 strips that are probably 14 inches long for this whole inside of the bag. So you could use this inside material, or you could make those 2-inch strips out of like a coordinating fabric, or really whatever you want to do. So if you're using scraps, this is perfect for that. So on this bottom seam, where again we're going to put this binding strip about 1/4 inch in. So you could do this all in one step, so the bottom seam and be adding this strip at the exact same time. That's totally fine if you want to do that. And then we're going to box these corners. You just do the seam on the side and then the seam on the bottom, and we're gonna tilt one seam towards one way and the other seam towards the other way. That way we just have half the bulk there. And so now we're going to do what we did on our original binding seams. We're going to sew this seam, and we're just going to keep that binding strip open. And you can still use your 2-inch strip, that's fine. But we're just going to sew across that whole seam there. It's a small seam. But again, we want to have one seam going one way and one the other way to reduce the bulk. And then we're just going to wrap this binding strip around like we did the very first time, but we're also going to tuck those corners in. So this little piece that we're sewing on the edge kind of crosses over those 2 other binding strips. So we want to make sure that we fold these edges in and have a nice clean edge here. And then we'll be doing the same thing on the other side as well. So we want to make sure that we back tack on both sides of this, and then of course when we do the other side, you want to make sure that you're doing that as well, because this is the last seam, so nothing else is crossing over these seams. Okay, so now we're done with this bag. We just turn it inside out, and then we make sure that zipper works nice. And we have our whole boxy bag here, and I really like this bag a lot. It really holds its shape well. Next time we're going to work on a scrappy bag that is the same shape, but we're going to do it out of scrap. So I'm just showing a video that I have that's a zipper pouch and more like a pencil bag kind of shape, and that's a video that is on this channel as well, which you can go back and watch. So thank you so much for watching this, and I really hope that you do one of these bags. And you can go back to the beginning and do that template and then hold on to that, and you can do as many of these bags as you have fabric for. So thank you so much for watching.